focused on the Boston Celtics getting a miracle win in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, on Jaylen Brown showing that he's got the clutch gene, on Jayson Tatum taking over in overtime, on the Pacers giveth and the Celtics taketh. Listen, this game was not exactly what the Boston Celtics envisioned when they came into Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the number 6 seed Indiana Pacers. Boston, on multiple occasions, pulled ahead by double digits. But every single time Indiana came back, and in the end of regulation, it certainly felt like Indiana was going to be the team that would grab this win. However, the Boston Celtics and Jaylen Brown would not go away. Jaylen Brown came up clutch in 3 different instances during the final minute. I'm going to rattle these off for you right now. With about 58 seconds left in regulation, Jaylen Brown heads to the free throw line, where he has not been great this postseason, and he drills both free throws to keep the Celtics in striking distance. Later in the game, with about 8.5 seconds left, the Celtics need to force a turnover, and they get it when Jaylen Brown is the one who applied pressure to Pascal Siakam on the inbound pass and forced a turnover on the inbound pass. Without that play, the Boston Celtics have zero chance of winning this game. Zero chance. But Jaylen Brown gave the effort when they needed it most, and he forced that turnover. And listen, it was semi-unforced. Like, Indiana still had a timeout left. They could have called timeout. They didn't. But these are the advantages of playing against a team that is inexperienced, right? Some of this stuff happened when the Boston Celtics got to the finals in 2022 against the Golden State Warriors, obviously. Yes, had Boston had some experience in prior years of getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, playing in some big games? Absolutely. But had they played on that stage in the finals of the NBA against a true champion that is etching itself in stone as a dynasty? No, they hadn't been there. And they did exactly what the Pacers did tonight. They turned it over. They let the pressure get to them, and they weren't able to overcome it. That happened to the Pacers tonight, but this is what happens for the Celtics when you earn the right to play a team that doesn't have as much experience as you do. But still, without Jaylen Brown applying that pressure on the inbound pass against Pascal Siakam, this game is over. This game winds up in the hands of Indiana, and they take a 1-0 lead in this series. But that's not what happened. Jaylen Brown did apply that pressure. Pascal Siakam did touch the ball going out of bounds because of that pressure after Andrew Nembhard inbounded the ball where he probably shouldn't have. He should have called a timeout. But Jaylen made it happen with the pressure he applied, and then just seconds later, after a timeout by Joe Mazzulla, and by the way, for everyone who likes to talk down on Joe Mazzulla and act like this guy doesn't know what he's doing, he knows what he's doing. And not only did he call a timeout at the right time, and by the way, he had timeouts because he saved them and managed them properly. Not only did he call the right timeout, but then he drew up a beautiful inbound play. You go and rewatch the action. Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum basically ran the exact same action on each side of the court, around the extended elbow area. Derek White was screening on one side for Jaylen Brown. Al Horford was screening on the other side for Jayson Tatum. And one of them was going to pop out to the corner off a read and catch the ball for a game-tying three-point attempt. And the Celtics had to try to tie this game. There wasn't enough time left to try to score a 2 foul in advance because the Celtics were out of timeouts. They had to go for 3. So Jaylen Brown curls off that screen by Derek White, pops out into the corner. He gets the pass from Jrue Holiday, and this is right in front of Indiana's bench, which makes all of this even better. Jaylen Brown catches the ball. Pascal Siakam is all over him. I mean, he's draped on him. It might show up in the 2-minute report as a foul. There was definitely contact there, and Jaylen wound up falling to the floor. But with Pascal Siakam all over him, with Jaylen rising up in front of Indiana's bench, who you know, all those guys right behind him, they were chirping. They were chirping right in his ears. Jaylen Brown rises up and cashes in on maybe the biggest shot of his NBA career, and this is a guy who has played in 6 Eastern Conference Finals now and 1 NBA Finals. This might be the biggest shot that he's ever made. It was with the game on the line. Boston needed that bucket, just like they needed the free throws earlier on, 50 seconds before. Just like they needed that turnover forced with Pascal Siakam and Andrew Nembhard. Jaylen Brown made the play. He rose to the occasion. He showed that he's got the clutch gene. He drained the three-pointer. Then Boston got the stop, and it was overtime. And let me tell you, when I was sitting in that garden, that place was going nuts. The environment went to a whole other level. And the great part about it, we're going to touch on this later in the episode, is the Boston fan base never gave up on this potential comeback. Okay, they were right there, and they felt like there was a shot. The Celtics forced a couple turnovers. Indiana committed a couple turnovers, and it kept Boston and the crowd feeling like we might have a chance here. And they did have a chance. Jaylen Brown made it happen. He forced it in overtime. Like I said, the crowd was going bananas. It was bonkers in there. Absolutely crazy. I got goosebumps after that shot by Jaylen, and after that, felt like that's all she wrote. Jayson Tatum took over during overtime, scored 8 straight points at one point, scored 10 points overall. I believe there was a post on X. I can't remember who sent it out, but that was the most, Tom Haberstroh. That was the most amount of points, 10 points in overtime, the most overtime points a player has scored in the NBA since 2021. So it's been 3 seasons since someone did what Jayson Tatum did tonight. So I wonder what the national discourse is going to be and the conversation is going to be about the Celtics tomorrow. They came up clutch. Jaylen Brown came up clutch. Forced overtime with 3 huge plays during the final minute. As I said, made both free throws when the game was on the line. He needed to make those free throws. He forced the turnover when Boston needed to force that turnover. And then lastly, he cashes in on that 3 right in front of Indiana's bench and right with Pascal Siakam draped all over him. And then you get to overtime and Jayson Tatum takes over. 10 points, at one point 8 straight, made the biggest 3 of the game outside of Jaylen Brown's game-tying three-pointer. That's the one that pushed the Boston Celtics up by, I believe, 4 or 5. And that bucket, when he made that, it felt like, okay, this is all Boston from here on out. And it was. So the conversation tomorrow should be about Jaylen Brown coming up clutch, about Jayson Tatum doing the same in overtime, and the Boston Celtics finding a way to win when they didn't play a great basketball game. That's what it should be. Indiana made some mistakes. They cracked the door open, but guess what? When a team cracks the door open, another has to walk through. The Celtics figured out a way to walk through that crack tonight. But that doesn't mean that every team would have walked through that crack in the door tonight. The Celtics found a way. They made the big plays. And you can tell it to everyone who's listening, it was the Jays who made those big plays. So looking forward to seeing what everyone talks about tomorrow. As I said, this was not a great performance by the Celtics. They allowed Indiana to shoot over 50% from the field in this game. Indiana played great offense. They just wound up turning the ball over a little too much. 22 turnovers on the night. You're not going to win many playoff games when you commit 22 turnovers. And the Celtics only committed 13 of their own. So they relatively took care of the ball. We'll talk about this in a little bit. They had some ugly turnovers, but Indiana kept them in the game with all the turnovers they had. Indiana had 7 players score in double figures, at least 12 or 13 points. This is what we expected from Indiana, right? This is what has gotten them to this point. TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin coming off the bench from them played really well, but the Celtics had their entire starting 5 playing at a high level. Drew Holiday scored a season high and career high as a Celtic. Obviously, this is his only season. 28 points on the night. Jaylen Brown finishes up with 26 of his own. And then Jayson Tatum, just a monster double-double. 36 points, 12 rebounds to tie for the game high in that category, and the 36 points led the game. Also had 4 assists and 3 steals. And then you've got also Al Horford and Derek White adding in 15 points apiece, and Derek White also led the Celtics in assists with 9. So the starting 5 for Boston played really well. Didn't get a whole lot from the bench tonight. That's okay. The Celtics got out of this game. They got out of it with a win. Now they get to come back on Thursday, hopefully playing at a much higher level as a team, getting a little bit more from the bench, and trying to pull up for a 2-0 lead on the Indiana Pacers. All right, we're going to take some comments from our fans after this game, one of which this fan was actually at the game tonight. First and foremost, we've got Jonathan Vankin on the national narrative around the Celtics heading in tomorrow. I already touched on that, but we're going to go a little bit deeper on it. Alan Acosta, who was at this game, comments on the crowd's impact on this game. And then lastly, we've got Metal Trowel on what the Celtics need to improve on heading into Game 2. So with that, let's dive in. Jonathan Vankin, you're up first. All right, Jonathan Vankin is up first, and here's what he had to say after this game. Great win. They've been raked over the coals for not having been tested. Well, they were tested in crunch time, twice in one game. I'm sure the takes will be they should have blown those guys out. But the Pacers are in the Eastern Conference Finals for a reason. Jonathan, you make a lot of great points here. The Celtics have been, the narrative, a lot of people have been playing both sides of the coin about the Boston Celtics, not only throughout this playoff run, because Boston has earned the right to play some teams that weren't quite as good, and they've been looking down on the Celtics because of that. The Celtics earned that right. How can you look down on that? Boston is playing the teams that it earned the right to play, who were at the bottom of the bracket, because Boston was way better than every team in the NBA during the regular season. 64 wins. So that doesn't make any sense to me. But people have been trying to play both sides of the coin, saying that, number one, oh, well, the Celtics are blowing teams out because they're playing teams that aren't very good. Well, okay. Well, the Celtics earned the right to play teams that weren't that good. They earned the right to play the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, and then the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They earned that right because they were that great throughout the regular season. But then those same people also seem to be trying to say, well, the Celtics haven't been tested, to Jonathan's point here. They can't win a close game. Well, they just did. They just came back and won that game. So are you going to give them credit for winning that game? Or are you going to try to find and weasel your way out of this and find another way to say, like, oh, well, the Celtics shouldn't have been in that position in the first place? Which one is it? Do they have to blow teams out every single game? Or do they have to win close games? You tell me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and Jonathan is right on here talking about it. And then lastly, he talks about the Pacers are in the Eastern Conference Finals for a reason. Listen, Indiana has earned its right to get into the Eastern Conference Finals. No team gets to the Eastern Conference Finals, or the Western Conference Finals for that matter, without earning that right and playing high-level basketball. It doesn't matter who you play against. The NBA is tough. No matter who you play throughout the regular season, it's usually not a cakewalk on any given night. And when you get into the postseason, it's definitely a challenge every single night. So think of the run that the Pacers have gone on. They've had to make a lot of big plays. They've had to come up clutch over and over and over to get to this point where they are right now. This is a good team, a deep team, with someone who is an all-star who, by the way, before the new year, Tyrese Halliburton was in the MVP conversation. This is a really good Pacers team, one of the most powerful offenses in the history of the game. They're here for a reason. The Celtics aren't supposed to win by 30 every game when they're playing against one of the final 4 teams playing basketball in the tournament this season. This is not a cakewalk, and we saw that tonight. But Boston found a way to battle back, and there's no way you can overlook this. Yes, did the Pacers make some mistakes? Absolutely. But the Celtics made them make those mistakes. Jaylen Brown forced that turnover at the end of the game. Should Nembhard have called timeout? Should Rick Carlisle have called timeout? Yes. But they didn't. And then Jaylen Brown made the defensive play. And then everyone had to make the offensive plays for the Celtics to win this game. So, yeah, the Celtics have been raked over the coals for not having been tested. Well, they were tested tonight, and they found a way to win. That's all that matters. All right, next up, we've got a comment from Alan Acosta, and he says, I was in the building. Good for you, Alan. This was a great night to be at TD Garden. The crowd helped will this team to the victory. We didn't give up on them, and they didn't give up on us. This team has championship DNA. You said it perfectly, Alan, because obviously I was in the building as well, and you kind of felt this connection between the two sides, the players on the court and the fans in the crowd. Neither of them gave up. They were both helping each other out. It was like a relationship, and this has really developed throughout this regular season, something Joe Mazzulla emphasized to his players heading into this season. We need to establish a relationship with our fan base so they aren't feeling anxiety when we play a few bad minutes. We need to make sure that they are confident in us and we are confident in them. And that whole season of concentrating on building that relationship, that two-way relationship, leads to a night like tonight. Like Alan Acosta said, the crowd did not give up on the players, and then the players made it pay off for the crowd in the end because they are the ones who got them jacked up with Jaylen Brown made those plays at the end of regulation, and Jayson Tatum absolutely took over in overtime. Again, it's a two-way relationship. The fan base is connected to this team this season. The fan base has always been great. But the past few seasons, with the way that the Celtics have made some mistakes that led to the end of their seasons, there's been some growing anxiety in this building at TD Garden. The fans have been awesome, but you can feel it, or you could feel it. You don't feel that this year. This year, you feel confidence coming from the crowd. You feel confidence going right back to them from the players. And tonight you saw it pay off in a dramatic, miraculous comeback win, spurred by Jaylen Brown at the end of regulation, then Jayson Tatum in overtime. And lastly, Alan Acosta says, this team has championship DNA. Yes, they do. Like, literally, Jrue Holiday has been there, done that. He has won a championship, and I'm telling you, like, that has impacted this team this season. You think it didn't impact them at the end of this game, having Jrue Holiday inbounding the ball? He was the guy who passed it to Jaylen Brown over in that corner for that three-pointer. He had to read the defense, make the on-time, on-target pass. So that initiated the Jaylen game-tying three-pointer. This team does have championship DNA, and it is different. This team is different. You can sense it, as Alan Acosta sensed when he watched this game live in person at TD Garden tonight. Alan, congratulations. I'm happy you were there to watch this. I hope you're there Thursday night as well. All right, last up, we've got Metal Trowel saying, a game I thought was over, and then JB reminded us that this team is different. We just touched on that with Alan Acosta. Only thing I'm worried about were some really bad passes to nobody that led to turnovers, which leads to Indy fast breaks. Lots to take from this, but the Celtics have the clutch gene, and that is why they are different. The Celtics have had the clutch gene to a certain extent to have the success that they've had over the last 8 seasons, with now 6 bursts into the Eastern Conference Finals and 1 trip to the NBA Finals. They've had a little bit of it. But this team, I've said it all season long. I've said it episode after episode of Sound Off. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, please go back and search. Right now, they're under the View from the Rafters feed on all of our audio podcast platforms. You can find it. But I've been saying episode after episode, this team is different. Like, you watch them throughout the regular season, all of those old characteristics that used to creep up, those demons that used to creep up on this Celtics team and would bite them in the butt, they haven't existed this year. Boston doesn't let things snowball. They don't go long stretches with poor play. They never lost more than 2 straight games this season. That's miraculous in and of itself. You can only do that if you have championship DNA. Like, yes, this team hasn't won the title at this point, other than Jrue Holiday, but like, that is championship DNA. When you can stop things from snowballing, when you can recover both mentally, physically, and on the court and making the right plays. We haven't seen that out of this team in the past, but we've seen it all season long this time around, and that's why they're different. Now, to your point here, Metal Trowel, about the turnovers, there's no doubt about it. Listen, in this game, as I said, it was 15 turnovers. I said 13 earlier. 15 turnovers for the Celtics in this game. And I would say at least a handful of them were questionable at best. They were kind of a little bit lackadaisical, not quite concentrating enough, maybe underestimating the effort that Indiana was bringing to the table. I think we can chalk a little bit of this up to the fact that the Celtics hadn't played in 6 days. A little bit. That's not an excuse. It's a reason. But at the same time, there were moments where I thought the Celtics just they relaxed a little bit with the way that they were taking care of the ball. Now, that was uncharacteristic of this team. This team has not been loose with the ball and giving the ball away throughout this season. They're one of the best teams in the league at taking care of the ball. So I chalk it up as this was a little bit of a unique situation, something that is not going to be replicated throughout this series. I think Boston will take care of the ball, and this tonight just happened to be a night, one of those rare nights where they kind of lost concentration a few times here and there throughout the game. And that did help Indiana. There's no question about it. They turned some of those turnovers into some big plays, as we saw the three-point play at the end of the third quarter. I believe that came after a turnover by the Celtics. That was a Tyrese Halliburton three. The Celtics got to take care of the ball. Actually, Joe Mazzulla said that on Monday after practice. The Celtics need to do a few things. They need to rebound the basketball, and they need to take care of the ball. They cannot allow this high-powered offense of the Indiana Pacers to get out and run. How do you prevent that? You rebound, and you take care of the ball. Tonight, they did both of those at a decent level. They were right there in the rebound department, only lost by 1. And they did win the turnover department, but they can be better in both departments heading into Game 2. So a couple of things, as Metal Trowel is saying, a couple things to take from this game, to learn from and apply to Game 2. And Game 2, folks, is coming up on Thursday night. That game will also be played at 8 o'clock. You can catch that game on ESPN as the Boston Celtics look to take a 2-0 series lead. Tonight, this was a miracle. I watched a miracle in person. Alan Acosta was there, watched a miracle in person as well. But boy, was it entertaining. And boy, could this be the type of win that spurs a team into the NBA Finals. This is a momentum builder and one of those wins that everyone, the fan base, the players, the coaches, can look themselves in the mirror and say, when the going gets tough, we have what it takes to pull off the miraculous comeback. They did it tonight. Let's hope they don't have to do it in Game 2. Let's hope they pull away with a pretty comfortable win. But again, that game is coming up Thursday night at 8 o'clock on ESPN. And we'll see you Thursday night after that game with yet another episode of Sound Off. I appreciate you taking part in it, and I'll see you Thursday night after Game 2. Good night, everyone.